Hello, welcome to my beer tasting segment here on my YouTube channel. The beer I'm drinking tonight is from a local brewery here in Ross, New Brunswick called Foghorn. It's their Esty ESB. Drinking with my Elvis Costello glass tonight. That's a special beer that gets to go in that glass. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Craig Penny. I'm a sommelier. I'm a certified beer judge. I've been drinking what I call good beer, flavorful beer, since the mid-'80s. I know that seems a long time ago, and it is. I did my beer judge certification in the early '90s, and I've been basically hunting good drinks since then. I also took my SOM certification in 1999, and I do spirits, beer, wine, cider, everything pretty much, beverage, alcohol, evaluation, judging professionally, and I write about it and consult for restaurants and pubs and festivals, etc. So this style, the bitter, this is an ESB. I'm going to pour it. The English bitter is a much misunderstood beer style. And I think a lot of that comes from the problem that so many of the people who've gotten into good beer recently in the last 5 years or so, that bitter has not been a super trendy style. So they've really started with IPAs and super hoppy American influenced beers, which can be excellent, of course. But a lot of people don't understand the older styles, the more classic styles, and I think that trend is changing, and we're seeing more of that nowadays. So the bitter style, which was really what, when I was first into good beer in Canada, was kind of the most popular style, I would say. Either a bitter, best bitter, pale ale, whatever you want to call it, whether it was when I was in Nova Scotia or when I moved to Ontario in the late '80s. That was kind of the thing. And when I got into home brewing, that was the main thing that we started brewing at first. Sort of the most common beer. So you're sort of everyday, and there was no such thing as an IPA in terms of what we really knew and what was on the shelves at that time. Eventually they came along, and there had been IPAs in England for a long time, but really bitter is the main beer of England. And bitter has different styles. It goes from the low alcohol, low bitterness of an ordinary bitter, steps to best bitter, slightly more body alcohol bitterness, and it just keeps working its way up. Bitter, best bitter, ESB, extra special bitter, and then into stronger ales. So what Foghorn is trying to do here with this Esty, which is named after Andrew Estabrooks, the brewer, is to make that kind of a slightly higher alcohol, slightly bitter version. It's 5.5%, 35 IBU. So yeah, in England, that I think that's an ESB. Somebody can correct me on that, but I seems to me they're doing what they want. Color-wise, quite often that style is kind of that amber color, and you can see that it is that. An ordinary bitter can be quite a bit lighter, and they have these things called summer ales now, which are kind of like, they can be a range of alcohol, but they would be a more golden style, kind of like our cream ales here in Canada, if you know that style. So the ESB should use English style hops, or English hops, your Fuggles and Goldings and the like. There's other ones that instead of being that citrusy or a very herbal, piney note that you get in American style, it should be more earthy, grassy, maybe slightly floral. So very different style hops. Malt-wise, these beers should be they're malt driven beers. The hops are, even though it's called bitter, the bitters are not bitter. That's the biggest misconception about them. When you travel there and drink cask beer, you notice right away, wow, these beers aren't bitter. They're smooth and balanced and very drinkable. So if you like really hoppy, bitter beers, English style is more of a step down to a different style. But I think you can learn to like them if you were weaned on super hoppy beers. You could still learn to like a good English style. Now, I was weaned on this style, so it's where I go first. And yes, I like a good hoppy American style ale, but if I only had to choose one ale, it would be this style. So smell, fairly subtle, a little malty, a little bit of that caramel note. I don't find the hops very present. I mean, they're there, but there's not like it's not jumping out like it would for an American style. But pleasant, very pleasant. Taste-wise, well, first I will say there's a really nice initial flavor of that caramel malt and hop flavor and bitterness that washes across the palate. Good body, not like super full or thick, and certainly not sweet. It's and that's another misconception about malty beers, is that they're sweet. Malt can be sweet. Malty flavors can be sweet, but it's more of the flavor of the malt, and the beer is still dry. I really like the texture of the beer. It's in wine we talk about mid palate, that kind of feeling between the start and the finish, and it's kind of smooth, goes across the tongue nicely. Bitterness wise, it says 35 IBU, which somebody who's into IPAs or double IPAs, or that's nothing. But for somebody who drinks regular North American beer, that's quite a high bitterness level. In this beer, the 35 just comes across as just a balance to the malt. It's there, and it's not. You don't really think too much about the bitterness when you're drinking this beer. Certainly, it's there, and on the finish, it gives the freshness and the palate cleansing, so it doesn't just leave you with a cloying malty taste. Not at all. I mean, you can still taste the malt, but the bitterness is fresh. It's really good. When you have beers like this in Canada, people ask me a lot of times, because I go to England so often and drink beer there, is like, are beers here like that at all? And rarely are they. And that includes, I've been to most of the States and drink. I'm always looking for UK style beers when I'm in the US or Canada. Found some that are very good and very similar, but it's pretty rare to find one that I think would pass for an English cask ale. Now, of course, that's not fair, because we're not drinking them as cask ales prepared properly by a publican who knows what they're doing in terms of cask management. So it's difficult to compare. So when I drink this beer, I don't think, wow, this tastes just like X, this beer that I had in England, because it's not prepared in that way. And quite often the bottled or canned beers in England are not, they're pale, pardon the pun, they're pale imitations of the cask, meaning that they tend to not have the complexity of flavor and textural appeal of a good cask beer. So to me, I don't think of, other than some of the, special strong beers or bottle conditioned beers in England, I don't think of bottled or canned beer as the good English beer. It doesn't mean I wouldn't drink them or that they're not good, a good beer. But when I think of the best beers in England, they're all cask. So in Canada and the US, there's not too many places that do a proper job of that. I've had a few that are pretty close, like Spinnaker's in Victoria and BC. Granite Brewery for sure, Toronto and Halifax, they can do it. And Stillwell's Freehouse, the new pub in Halifax, has been doing cask versions of some of the other local microbreweries, and they know what they're doing. They have some people who've got some experience with cask beer, both in Ontario and in England, and that place is probably the top place in Canada, or one of the top places, if you want that experience. But if you just want to have a really good kind of English style packaged product, or on draft, where you can get Foghorn beers on draft, and this Esty Special Bitter is definitely a very appealing in that style of the English treatment of a pale ale, which historically, of course, comes long before the American ones. And it's not about what's better or worse, it's what you like. And I like this style better. So I think this is a great beer. It's one of the best, I think, in New Brunswick, and I drink it a lot. So cheers, and I'll be back next week with another one of my favorite New Brunswick beers. Let's get through this plague together. Cheers. Good night.